Hello, and welcome to Be a Better Landlord. My name is Ashley Kerr, and I am so excited to be one of the new hosts for the show. You can also find me on the Real Estate Rookie podcast with Bigger Pockets. I've been an investor since 2013, and before that, a property manager. I normally do buy and hold long term rentals. That's kind of my foundation for my properties. But I've done some flips, I've done some short term rentals, and tried out a variety of strategies. I can't wait to share with you all of the mistakes I've made and the lessons learned along the way to help you prevent those same mistakes that I made. I'm also here to give you some templates, some checklists, and guide you along the way of what it takes to be a landlord in today's current market conditions. I'm also an avid TurboTenant user, so along the way, I'll be filling in some of the things that I use TurboTenant for and how it has made my life so much easier. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I have a special show for you for our first one to kick it off together. We're going to be talking about 30 days with your first tenant. My first property was a duplex and it had a tenant downstairs and then the upstairs was vacant. I had no system, no process for how I was going to, even introduce myself to this tenant and to say, I'm your new landlord. You got to start paying me rent. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned along the way that there is so much you can do to get ready for that first tenant before you actually close on the property. The biggest thing you can do is prepare yourself for questions by having those answers. And I always like to put together a tenant handbook. And this gives them all of the information about the property, including how to contact you, how to submit maintenance requests, how to pay their rent. And I think those are like the three major things. And then I go along into so much detail on the property itself. So, for example, where is the water shut off? If I'm sending somebody out there for a pipe that has burst, I would really like for my tenants to be proactive and to know where the water shutoff is so they can shut off the water to prevent any damage until my plumber gets there. I'm also go ahead and putting in there the square footage of the different rooms, putting in how to operate the garage door, different things like that. These really common questions, but I try to get as detailed as I possibly can, knowing that this is going to be the person living in this home and I want them to take good care of it. I even go as far as giving them instructions on how to safely go ahead and try to remediate a clogged toilet or a clogged drain without always having to call out a plumber. So I give some advice and some tips and tricks as to what they can do to actually handle a maintenance issue before they even need to contact me of different things to try. So the next thing I'm doing when I'm inheriting a tenant before I even close on the property is reviewing the lease agreements. With the lease agreements, I'm making sure that all of the information is what the owner of the property told me is correct. Then I'm sending an estoppel agreement to the tenants. I would make sure that you do ask permission from the seller, though, before you send the estoppel agreement. I once did not do that, and I sent out the estoppel agreements, and the tenants didn't even know the owner was selling the property, and it caused a little bit of confusion, and the owner was upset, and you don't wanna make your seller upset when you're trying to close on the property. So first get their permission to send out the estoppel agreement. And on this estoppel agreement, it's basically going through the things that are stated in the lease agreement, verifying that the landlord and the tenant are on the same page so that when you close on the property, you're not having a tenant tell you, well, no, that's not true. I actually paid $1,000 in security deposit, but the seller only told you it was 800. Especially if they don't have a lease agreement or the lease agreement is very, very vague. The property that I had done the estoppel agreement for where the seller was upset, I sent them there was a lot of differences in what the seller had said, and the lease agreements were very, very vague, didn't even list what the security deposits were. So this was great because I could get clarity, I could get everything in order before I actually closed on the property and communicated to the tenants. So, well, actually, this is what the seller is saying. And I had the seller kind of figure it out on his own that everybody was on the same page so that I wasn't left with a mess after closing and the seller just wiping his hands clean of the property. So in the Estoppel agreements, things like how to contact the person, what is their email, so you can set them up with their TurboTenant portal. What is their phone number? Who are the people living at the property? Do they have any pets? Do they pay a pet fee? The appliances. Who owns the appliances? Do they? Sometimes in some very vague leases, those are not listed in there. Who owns what? Then who pays utilities? Who takes care of the snow removal? Who takes care of the landscaping? I try to go into much detail as possible. I also asked them, when was the last time that they paid rent? So are they up to date? Are they going to actually be honest and tell me they're 2 months behind? But the seller said, oh, everybody's paid up to date. They're great tenants by my property. So having an estoppel agreement can just help you understand everything that's going on at the property and make sure the seller and the tenants are on the same page and everything also matches the lease agreements. If you do not get permission from the seller, and maybe if you're using an attorney to close, maybe have the attorney kind of push, to get the estoppel agreement sent out before closing. Worst case scenario, you can do this when you close on the property to figure out what you need to figure out right away to get this situation taken care of. So you want those lease agreements, you want to send out those estoppel agreements, and then you also want to create your tenant handbook, not only for tenants that you're inheriting that already lived in the property, but also for future tenants too that are coming in. And I also like to use this tenant handbook as almost like a guidebook for myself also too on the property. Besides those things, I also really like the seller to actually tell the tenants that they're going to sell the property and that you're going to be buying it. On that same property where the landlord didn't want anybody to know he was selling it, I tried to contact one of the tenants to like let them know, here's how you pay rent, here's everything. And they told me that I was trying to scam them, and that was not true. So it was really beneficial for me to actually have the landlord call and to set it up so that everybody knew that I'm not someone trying to scam them, that yes, they actually did sell the property. And whether that's written notice, a phone call to the tenants, but there is some way you can have the owner actually tell the tenants he's selling it so that they don't think that you are someone trying to scam them and to get their rent money. After you close on the property, you need to set the expectations. And this is how to submit a maintenance request. So, in my lease agreements and in my handbook, and on like a one pager that just highlights all of the important information, I am putting in that to submit a maintenance request, you go to your TurboTenant portal and you're submitting the request, and all communication for it goes through there. I'm also putting in like a little description of what information I expect when they submit a maintenance request to, like photos, details on it, how serious is it, things like that. That can actually really help me go through and diagnose what's the next step with this maintenance request. Then, as how to contact me. So maybe it's not a maintenance issue, but maybe it's something else that they need help with, they need clarity on, or just a question about their upcoming lease renewal. And I put in there my first form of communication is going to be TurboTenant through the messaging. Everything is documented all in one place. The next step is email because I really, really like things in writing. And then the third is a phone call to a Google Voice number that I have set up that they can contact me at. So I think it's very clear to set these expectations, have them know exactly how they can contact you. And you could even go as far as when you're available to be contacted. I mean, I like the messaging, knowing that it's on my phone. I can kind of get the messages whenever. And I don't really have a clear expectation like, oh, I'll get back to you within 24 hours or 48 hours or only Monday through Friday. But if that is something that you wanted, you could definitely go ahead and put that into your expectations. The next piece of this, after the expectations, are the lease agreements. Are there any addendums that need to be added that maybe aren't clear in the other person's lease agreements? When is the next lease renewal? Do you need to start getting that ready? In New York State, we have timelines if you're increasing the rent as to how much notice you have to give someone. Or if you're not even renewing their lease at all, how much notice you have to give them. So, depending how long they live there, it could be up to 90 days in advance that you're having to let them know about your lease renewal. So, if that time is coming up, you might want to take action on it now. So, make sure you have all your dates aligned for those lease renewals, or if you do need to add any addendums to your lease agreement, like maybe there's nothing mentioned about a pet, so you want to create a pet addendum for them that states the information about the pet and that they'll comply to these rules for the property with the pet agreement. Also, too, in your town that you live in, do they require that all pets be registered? So, like checking up on things like that, that the pet is registered, or notifying the resident that they need to get the pet registered so that your property is in compliance. The next thing you need to make sure, if you are going to require this, which I highly recommend you do, is that they have renter's insurance. So they'll need to update their renter's insurance, showing that you are on the policy, that is no longer the previous landlord that is added on to there, and that they submit proof of the renter's insurance policy to you too at that time. Now, the last piece that I want to add to this is having a team in place. When I first started working as a property manager, it was April 1st, 2013. It was my first day. And I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I was coming from an accounting background, and I was taking on this 40-unit apartment complex. I was told the job was to help an investor get organized, and it kind of led to managing this property. So I got a cell phone and I was like, okay, this is because it was remote. There wasn't really like an office. There was an office, but I wasn't required to be there. And it was just in the 40 apartment complex. I was a team of one at that point. So I got a cell phone, and at 8 a.m. on April 1st, 2013, my first tenant calls and says that the electrical outlet isn't working. I had no handyman, I had no vendors, I had nothing lined up. So I had to call my friend that I knew was pretty handy and say, I need a really big favor. I will pay you, but do you think you can come and do this for me, this maintenance request? And I went with him to the property, and you went and took care of that. So you really need to have a team lined up. You need to have vendors that you know that you can call when a maintenance request comes up. I highly recommend having 2 to 3. One thing that I'm really good at is collecting information on different vendors. So if I see in a Facebook group someone in my market recommends somebody for anything, painting, plumbing, roofing, I am taking their contact information and I'm putting it into a spreadsheet. If I see a truck drive by, I will take a picture of their contact information on the side of the truck. And I will save that and then later go back and put it into my spreadsheet to update it. Here's another contact person. I have my preferred vendors that I'm using that I constantly use all the time, but I recently just had a plumbing issue where my preferred plumber wasn't available, and we already had a backup right in place that we could call and go to the property, and they got there within an hour. So instead of stressing out and trying to figure it out once you've closed on that property and waiting for the first maintenance request to come, have a team in place so that you are proactive and you can call the company, introduce themselves, you can get pricing for them, things like that. Or you could just have their contact information available and then call it. But I think having those contacts available will make your life so much easier. And also for your tenant, too, is your first time being a landlord, you want to be able to provide good service to your tenant. You don't want to be a landlord that, is ignoring maintenance requests, not getting them done, or it's taking a super long time for them to actually get completed. So, having that team built ahead of time is something you can even start doing before you close on it, but that will really help relieve the stress when you do get that first maintenance request. And when that first maintenance request comes from the tenant, I want you to remember this, that yes, it stinks. You're going to have to pay money out of your cash flow to take care of this problem. And yes, it's frustrating. And yes, it's annoying. And you got to take care of it. But we had a guest on an episode before that I was interviewing, and the guest went on to say that his first phone call, he was stressed out. The tenant called him, he got the information, then he called a plumber, and the plumber scheduled it for that afternoon. And he was all stressed out and all worried that the tenant's toilet wasn't working and he felt bad. And then he had to take care of this issue. And then he realized it took me 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes long. I just had to call the vendor. I had to talk to the tenant. The plumber was taking care of the issue. The tenant was happy it was being taken care of same day. And I'm cash flowing $500 per month on this property. That whole month, I spent 10 minutes taking care of something that was outside of looking to make sure they paid their rent and things like that. So I always try to stick with that mindset that as an investor, you have to know that things will come up. Your tenant will need you to communicate with them. You will need to fulfill maintenance requests. You will need to take care of things. And that is part of the responsibility of being a landlord. And you need to shift that mindset that your reserves aren't meant to be your life savings. Your reserves are meant to be spent on your property in the future for repairs and maintenance, capital improvements, to cover vacancies. Once you have that shift as a landlord, it gets so much easier and you become a better landlord because you're not so worried about having to deal with things or getting stressed out or having to pay to get things done. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today for my very first episode of Be a Better Landlord. If you have topics or things that you want me to go over, please leave a comment down below and I will be sure to look at them and see what I can do for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Ashley Kerr with Be a Better Landlord.